Dropping keys, recovery from codependency, and my grief journey. One day in the late spring of 2022, I was heading out to run errands and couldn't manage my keys to save my life. I dropped them while locking the front door. I dropped them before I got in the car. I dropped them in the car, and that's when I finally stopped and asked myself, why is this happening? Often when the universe is trying to get my attention, something seemingly mundane will occur multiple times. In this case, it wasn't specifically the universe that wanted my attention, but the energy of a lost loved one nearby. The keys were both the signal and the message. When I separated from my youngest child's father in 2019, it was in a blaze of anger and confusion. There was also a lot of fear for the future, and if I'm being honest, the present as well. Addiction has a way of changing a person like few other things I've witnessed. It leaves in its wake a path of devastation reminiscent of the worst hurricanes. Before long, I began to experience feelings of regret. I questioned whether I had done the right thing in asking him to leave. I would learn later on. This was one of the stages of grief, but at the moment, I wanted to figure out if I could fix it. So I reached out to a therapist to discuss the possibility of some joint sessions the next time he came back to visit. After a year in therapy and an ongoing pattern of ever-increasing toxic interactions, I made the decision to go no contact. At first, I did it just to give myself space to get through my father's hospitalization. When he passed in January of 2021, I wanted more time to work through those feelings and give myself space not to have to contend with anything else. It was the hardest and scariest thing I had ever done in my life. My need for my former fiance's approval lingered long after I had pushed him as far away as I could. My need to heal him and fix him, and yes, control him, was still very much present, but I knew that I could not continue to subject myself to the abuse that he was dishing out. His addiction raged on even as I challenged my codependency week after week, session after session in therapy. In the days when we were still in communication, I promised him that should the time come when he achieved even a few months of sobriety, I would open the door again for him to spend time with our son. Meanwhile, the court awarded me sole custody with no option for visitation other than at my own discretion. I wondered how long it would be before I would feel it was safe for myself and my children to allow him into our lives again. On September 29, 2021, I was in my car headed to a drive-thru for the kids. It was my parents' first anniversary after my father's death, as well as my youngest child's sister's birthday on his dad's side. There was a feeling of sadness in the air, and when my phone rang, I almost didn't want to answer it. Indiana was dying. He had been revived 3 times at that point and was put on life support. Less than a week later, with no hope of recovery, he fully transitioned to the afterlife. 8 months and 8 days after I lost my father, my baby boy lost his too. Some months afterward, I was in the midst of experiencing the greatest wave of spiritual activity I had encountered since the mid-90s. Day after day, night after night, I received fresh insight for myself, my family, my community, and the global community at large. My thoughts and feelings, even my body, was electrified with the continuous currents of divine love and understanding. I knew I had been in a season of preparation and that I was meant to return to ministry, not under the banner of a religion, but under the banner of mercy. After I realized that Indiana's energy was close to me, I asked him what I needed to know. The best way to access the spirit realm is to become as a little child. Simplicity opens our eyes. Faith bridges the gap between the seen and the unseen. I Googled the words dropping keys and came across a poem that encapsulates the greatest and most painful lesson I've been privileged to learn all my years on earth. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage who has to duck his head when the moon is low keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. Hafiz, 14th century. We expand in consciousness when we take accountability for our own actions. We grow in grace and wisdom when we stop viewing ourselves as victims and transition to the role of co-creator. We mirror the infinite when we cease to build cages for others and instead release them from judgment. We can only do that when we have first released ourselves from judgment. Long before my father passed, and my son's dad as well, I had forgiven them. The process of forgiving myself has not been as easy, but I have made peace with my own soul. If there is any wisdom in me to be shared with another, let alone the masses, let it be that I have only just begun to learn what it means to be. I wrote this in loving memory of Gerald Kirk, folks, and John Wesley Ashford Jr. You can find me on Substack at Indigo Bone. You can find me on Instagram at Indigo_Bone, also on Threads. You can find me on YouTube at Indigo Bone_YT. And Facebook also is at Indigo Bone. Thanks for listening. Dropping